Hi everyone, Michael here again for the latest in the Elite Dangerous Fiction Diaries. In this diary I'm going to tell you a bit about the process that we're going through in setting up the galaxy for the game. And as usual I'll answer a few questions from the DDF at the end of the video. Okay, so when putting the galaxy together we had two real sort of main goals. The first one, as stated in the Kickstarter, is that we want to model the galaxy as accurately as possible based on the real Milky Way. The other one is that the game continues on from where FFE left off. So in Frontier First Encounters that ended around sort of at 3250, and the game now continues from 3300. So how we started, we've taken the Gliese and Hipparcos catalogues, and they provided the bulk of the data for stars in our immediate region, as well as major stars out to 600-700 light years. I'm currently playing with a database of around 75,000 named stars. So as you can imagine, that's quite some spreadsheet at the moment. So the other thing was bringing across stuff from Frontier First Encounters. Now we know there's some favourite places that people like to visit, and there's also some key sort of locations from the fiction backgrounds that we've been putting together. So a good example of that is Lave, of course, which is famous from the very first game. So what we've been putting together is a series of overrides. So the galaxy itself is constructed from an algorithm. So we basically have a number of complex equations that say that there should be a star here, it's in a spiral arm, that kind of thing. And that generates the whole galaxy. But what we then have is a manual list of overrides that say, actually, there's a star at this specific point here. It's of this type, and we can assign the planets and the moons also as overrides within the system. So that means that some systems, the solar system being the classic example, will be fully sort of manually set up. So everything that you see is familiar to you. Where with other systems we'll do a mixture of, we'll let the system generate what star it is and the planets, but we might say, well, that particular planet there needs to be an Earth type planet. So a lot of that information we've extracted from Frontier First Encounters, and that's been compiled into a big database that can then be blended into the game data. So along with the sort of physical information, what size planet it is, how far it orbits, we also have a bunch of metadata that sort of helps define the system and the planet's role within the galaxy. So there's the allegiance, does it belong to a particular faction? Is it a Federation world or is it an independent world? What's its government type? So is it a corporate state or is it a federal democracy? We've got the different economic types. And people from the DDF and those reading the DDF archives, and if you haven't read them, then check them out on our forums. They'll know that all these sort of values, this metadata values, come to help drive what will be the background simulation for the galaxy, so that as time progresses, things change within the galaxy. So the main task that we're working on at the moment is setting up that initial state, so that when people start playing the game, it will evolve from that point onwards. And we're quite looking forward to, in the beta test, seeing how that works, with lots of players interacting with the galaxy as a whole. So once you set up the physical and metadata, one of the next things, of course, which will be dear to some of the backers' hearts, is that we need to do some of the naming. So there's a few people who are paid to have planet names, star names. So what we'll be doing as part of that is taking the descriptions that people have sent us and wherever possible matching that to a system that we can find. Matching systems that we can find has actually been an interesting task from bringing across data from FFE, and that there's a number of stars from FFE that we then had to relocate to match real star positions. So the map from FFE has changed quite a bit. There's still the familiar layout that Achenar is down below the solar system. But the positions are now that much more accurate than we had before, which is good, but it also makes space feel that bit bigger. So once we finish the reward naming and allocating what's happening where, the next stage will be to start developing what's changed since 2250. You know, is a disputed system still a disputed system? Are there any new colonies and that kind of stuff? But that's going to be a future topic, so check in for later fiction diaries to see what happens with that. So now we have a few questions from the DDF. The first question is from Andrew Sayers. How will fast travel hyperdrives change society? Will they uncover abuses in far-flung colonies, or allow those colonies to be flung yet further from sight? So that's quite an interesting question. The invention of the fast hyperdrive is fairly recent in terms of the history of the galaxy. And so part of the excitement for the game is actually exploring some of these issues and seeing how that sort of unveils with player interactions and also with the simulation of, you know, the political and economic forces in the galaxy. I mean, there's a few things that sort of stand out quite obviously. So, for example, military tactics. It's a lot easier to do hit and run if you don't have to spend weeks traveling between systems. However, the jumps themselves are a little bit shorter, so there's more sort of hopping jumps rather than big long range jumps. So that means that there's more opportunity for interdiction and sort of tripwire defences. So yes, I think it's quite an exciting change to the Elite Galaxy, and we're looking forward to seeing how people take advantage of it. Our second question is also from Andrew Sayers, so that's we're not picking on you specifically, we just like those two questions. How closely will fiction interact with in-game storytelling? So that will vary depending on the story itself. Some of the stories that people are writing take place in the distant past, but we do intend that there be some marker of that in game. So locations that are mentioned in the story you can actually go and visit. Stories that are happening in contemporary times, we'll want to sort of use the news feeds or events within the game to sort of correspond to the stories that are unfolding. And also it will then depend on how the author wants, you know, to share that story within the game. So we'll be working with people individually to see, you know, what we can include in the game and how best to do that. So yes, I mean, wider than just the stories that people are writing is that the game itself will have its own rich history and fiction. So we want people to interact with sort of famous characters or discover new places, or, you know, there's legends that need to be tracked down. So yes, fiction will be a big part of the game. And the last question is from Commandante. Will any of the known factions be at war such that there are territorial boundaries where travel is dangerous? Yes is the simple answer to that. More involved answer is that the major powers, so the Alliance, the Federation and the Empire, they're at a state of peace. There's some sort of covert shenanigans going on, but there's no real sort of all-out war going on. However, the three main factions, I don't have an exact number, but they only form, say, half of the known sort of inhabited worlds within human space. So there's a lot of independent, smaller factions out there, and some of them will be going hammer and tongs at each other. So yes, there will be exciting and dangerous places for people to visit. Okay, so that's it for this latest Elite Dangerous Fiction Diary. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back soon. Thank you.